In the last part of this lecture series for this week, I want to take a moment and look at what's going on with our current situation. SARS-CoV-2 is the official designation of the virus itself, and COVID-19 is the term that's used officially for the disease. So let me go ahead and label that here. The SARS-CoV-2 is the virus, and COVID-19 is the disease that is caused by that virus. During that week before we left for spring break, I was amazed at how the recommendations for what we should do were changing from day to day. I have a friend that works at another university who on Monday started forwarding me emails that they were getting from their provost. The first provost email had come on Sunday, and then on Monday he forwarded it to me. I have a nephew who goes to another university, and that week he was told that their classes were canceled and that they should go home early if they possibly could, because their spring break was the same time as ours. But from one day to the next, it was amazing to watch how quickly the recommendations were changing. So, like, roughly speaking, on Monday, we were being told that as long as you were congregating in groups of 100 or less, things were okay. But you didn't want to have like really big groups, like, you know, a college football game or something like that. And so at this other university, they were talking about how they would probably still allow small classes that were under 100 in size, to continue meeting. But then within a day or two, they started changing that recommendation down to 50, and then it went from 50 to 25, and then it went from 25 to 10. And so it was just really amazing to watch how quickly those recommendations were changing. So why was this all so rapidly changing? Well, we were looking at the intersection of a whole lot of separate issues. Medicine, doctors were dealing with trying to treat an unknown disease. They were treating the symptoms as best they could. Scientists were looking into, all right, what's causing this? What can we do to fight it? Public health officials were trying to look at what the scientists and the doctors were saying and make recommendations for people in general. And keep in mind that each day we were getting new data because there just really wasn't a lot of data to start with. Public safety became an issue, and things like our supply chain, and you know, think about things like toilet paper disappearing off the shelves, crazy stuff. And then the economy, and this has huge impacts on the economy with our stay-at-home orders. So we're looking at a really interesting combination of things with trying to cope as a nation and as a society with this novel coronavirus. So let's see. If you were going to design an experiment for, sorry, my pointer disappeared here. If you were going to design an experiment for a medical study, I refer to that sometimes as DOE, design of experiment. Like, let's say you worked for a pharmaceutical company, and you figured that you had a better drug that could be used to treat high blood pressure. Well, what are some of the things you're going to do, right? You're going to need, once you get to human trials, you're going to need a large sample size. You're going to need to have a controlled study so that you can really prove that any improvement you see has to do with your particular medication. You're going to have a sample that's representative of the entire population, all sorts of stuff. Well, if you're trying to get a better high blood pressure medication, there already are a lot of blood pressure medications out there. Well, today, there isn't really yet a good treatment or a vaccination. And so when you're doing one of these medical studies, you've got to take your time and you've got to be careful, because if you make a mistake, people can die. If your sample size is too small, you might not discover an interaction between your new drug and some completely unrelated medication that many people routinely take, and that may result in people dying. You've got to have these large samples. You've got to have your controlled samples and representative samples. And you have got to take time so that you can analyze all of your data correctly and not fall into any of those traps that I call BS for bad science. So if you have the luxury of time, you need to take that time to do a careful scientific study, a controlled study, all that sort of stuff. But in our current situation, the public wants to know, right? We want to know, what do we need to do to stay healthy? What do we need to do to treat this if we do catch it? And with our 24-hour news channels, this is going to lead to things like sensationalized headlines, where there's a little blip in the data that suddenly becomes cure found for the headline. Misinterpreted results. Somebody might again see like one of these little blips that indicates, hey, this is probably something we should do, and it somehow becomes interpreted as everybody must do this right now. Conflicts of interest, right? Somebody working for a particular company that stands to gain if a process is adopted may start pushing for that, even if the science doesn't really point in that direction. And then, of course, there are all of the difficulties with correlation and causation. Just because two things are correlated does not mean that one causes the other one. All right, so that brings us up to the paper that I'm asking you all to write in lieu of doing a final exam. The main focus of your paper should be on the process of science, and I would like for you to focus on either the Flint water supply problem or the COVID-19 problem, or if you see something that's applicable to both and you want to deal with both, that's fine. You're focusing on the science side of things in these two crises, or one of these two crises, will be half of the points for your paper. I also want you to wrap into this your own personal perspective. Let's say you're a music major. We've seen some really incredible things. There's that performance of Ode to Joy. There are all of those performances in Italy in the evenings, in the streets. You know, the things that people do in response to a crisis. If your interests lie in business, there are all sorts of really bizarre things happening right now. If you want to talk about the supply chain, or you want to talk about local economies, or there are just so many directions you can go. So I'd like for you to make some sort of connection to something that is in your wheelhouse, whether that's something related to your major or something that you just have a particular interest in. And so that your personal perspective is 30 points, and then an additional 20 points are for making this a solid college level paper. Good grammar, correct spellings. Don't just rely on spell check, right? I did that. Well, actually, spell check wasn't commonly used. I actually used a typewriter on this paper that I'm going to tell you about. I wrote in one of my papers about a scientist who was working at the United States Naval Academy, and I'd have been so much better off if I had just spelled it USNA. Instead, I wrote out the words United States Naval Academy, and I spelled naval, N-A-V-E-L. Well, with an E right here, that means belly button. It does not mean Navy. So yeah, don't just rely too much on spell check. Make sure that you're writing a solid college level paper. General guidelines here, somewhere between 1 page and 1.5 pages, 11-point font, double-spaced. I'm going to ask you to use Turnitin through the tracks assignments. Those of y'all who are early birds on this, be patient. I've not actually set up the tracks assignment for this yet, but I will do that shortly. This paper is due May 4th at 11:50 p.m. I believe May 4th is our last day for regularly scheduled classes. The day after that is reading day. And then the day after that, May 6th, is when final exams start. So you will be free and clear of this class on the last day of classes as scheduled. All right. Well, good luck with this. I will still be having office hours via Zoom at 11 o'clock, Mondays through Thursdays. Feel free to drop in and chat with me about your paper. If you'd like to get sort of a preliminary approval for a topic or an idea before you invest a lot of time, I'd be happy to talk with you about that. Oh yeah, so for those of y'all who don't go and read my actual paper version of the directions for this paper, I just thought of one other thing that falls into this, solid college level paper. Cite your references. Don't just say, yeah, so many people have become sick, or the Flint water supply was too acidic. Get real data and show me where that data is coming from. I don't really care what form you use for your references. Go take a look at the paper that I'm going to post under Tracks Resources that gives you more detail on all of this, but you do need to cite your references. All right, good luck, and hopefully I'll see you in office hours.